Edward Richtofen has always been the villain, or at least that's what we've always been told. Now, for nearly 2 decades of Call of Duty Zombies, Richtofen has manipulated timelines, betrayed allies, destroyed worlds, and sacrificed entire realities into pursuit of his own goals. But what if Totenreich ended up changing everything? Now, what if the man standing at the center of the Dark Aether saga isn't trying to destroy humanity, but save it? Hidden throughout Totenreich's shocking revelations that completely recontextualize Edward Richtofen's role in Black Ops 7 Zombies, from the horrifying truth behind the Eidskalen Island and to his connection with the monstrous Dravok, to evidence that Richtofen may have known exactly what was coming long before anyone else. Today we're breaking down everything that was happening with Edward Richtofen and Totenreich, and trust me, you might see Richtofen as less of a villain than you did before, maybe almost like a necessary evil. Now, for years, Richtofen had existed in a strange position within Zombies lore. He's not a hero, and he's not a traditional villain. He's something much more dangerous, a man willing to commit atrocities if it means achieving what he believes is the greater good. And that's exactly where we find him during the events surrounding Totenreich. Because while our strike team is fighting for survival against impossible horrors, Richtofen is operating several moves ahead, as he always does. And before we can understand what he's doing in Totenreich, we need to understand what the place actually is, because Eidskalen Island isn't just another zombie-infested location. It's a graveyard. And a monument to failure, a reminder of a mistake that may haunt Richtofen forever. Now, outside of Richtofen blowing up New York City, this is the island that shouldn't exist. Now, Totenreich immediately feels different from the previous maps. The atmosphere is very gray, oppressive. The landscape feels off, wrong, and uncanny. Reality itself seems very unstable. That's because Eidskalen isn't simply a Norwegian island. It is a wound in the earth, the universe, if you will, a fractal existing outside space and time. Almost, right? Reality is fractured, the dead began to return, and something ancient has awakened beneath the island, something that should have never been disturbed. Now, what's fascinating is how often the map's intel points towards Richtofen's knowledge of these events. Not necessarily his direct responsibility, but his awareness of it all. Again and again, we see hints suggesting that Richtofen understood dangers that nobody else could comprehend. Now, he knew the Dark Aether wasn't just another dimension. He knew it contained entities far older than humanity, and he knew that every attempt to control it would eventually backfire. Now, yet despite all of this knowledge that he did know, the experiments continued. Now, why? Because desperation makes people do very stupid things, and nobody understands desperation better than our boy. Oh God, I'm yawning. Jeez, Edward Richtofen. Sorry, I got Stardew Valley going on in the background. My bad. Now, one of the biggest misconceptions surrounding modern Richtofen is that he's motivated by power. That's true for older versions of the character, but the Dark Aether Saga version is very different. His primary motivation isn't really domination, it's loss. More specifically, the loss of his family. We saw this in Liberty Falls. Now, throughout recent storylines, we've seen how deeply personal Richtofen's goals have actually become. Everything he does traces back to the people he's lost. Every unethical decision, every secret project, every lie, every betrayal, it all stems from the belief that he could somehow fix what has already happened, going all the way back to Call of Duty Cold War. And that's where Totenreich becomes so important in Black Ops 7, because the map repeatedly presents themes of resurrection, of bringing back the dead, of reversing fate and undoing tragedy. These aren't random narrative choices, they're reflections of Richtofen's obsession. Now, the island itself almost acts like a physical manifestation of his deepest desires, a place where death refuses to remain permanent, a place where consequences can be rewritten, a place where reality itself can be altered, the exact kind of place someone like Richtofen would desperately want to control, and the exact kind of place that would inevitably destroy anyone who tried to control it. Now, the Dravokar connection, you could talk about the monster, the big guy in the sky, if you will, one of the most terrifying entities we've ever encountered in the Dark Aether Saga. This guy is huge! When you just haymaker one of the Origins robots, that's insane to me. That is absolutely insane. Now, at first glance, it appears to be another powerful supernatural enemy, entity, or whatever you want to call it. But the deeper you dig into the lore, the more disturbing the truth really becomes. The Dravokar isn't simply a monster. It's just evidence. Evidence that something is fundamentally wrong with the boundary separating dimensions, space, and time in the continuum that is known as the Dark Aether universe. Now, the Dark Aether corruption has reached levels we previously thought impossible, and evidence that whoever unleashed these forces lost control very, very long ago. Possibly Richtofen. Now, The most interesting aspect of the Dravagar is how perfectly it embodies its consequences of forbidden knowledge, which essentially is Richtofen's entire story. Now, throughout Zombie's history, Richtofen has constantly sought answers. He's always wanted to know more, to see further, to understand things others could not. But knowledge comes with a price, and Totenreich repeatedly asks the same questions. How much should humanity know? Because every single discovery seems to create a new horror in this universe. Every breakthrough ends up leading to disaster, and every attempt to master the Dark Aether results in suffering, death, all this crazy stuff going on here. Now, the Dravagar stands as the ultimate warning against all of this, and a monument to curiosity without restraint, and perhaps a reflection of Richtofen itself. We can move over to the Project Janus crew. Now, many players assume Project Janus is ancient history, a failed operation, a closed chapter. Now, Totenreich kind of says otherwise. In fact, one of the biggest implications hidden throughout the map is that the ideas behind Janus never truly died. They evolved, they ended up shaping, reforming, adapting, they spread into other projects, other organizations, other agendas. This is where Richtofen becomes incredibly dangerous, almost psychotic, sadistic, because he understands connections nobody else can see. He understands how seemingly unrelated events are actually part of larger patterns. He sees cause and effect on a scale most people can't even comprehend. This makes him invaluable, right? But it also makes him terrifying. Because if Richtofen believes a certain outcome is necessary, what lengths will he go to try to achieve it? History suggests that there's almost no line he won't cross, and Totenreich hints that he may have already been preparing for conflicts far beyond the island itself. Now, the truth about the control, who has it, who loses it, whether it even truly existed in the first place, it just remains up for debate. The Germans in 1943 failed. Every single major faction failed. The Requiem failed. Countless scientists, yada, yada, yada. All this stuff going all the way back to called the Vanguard. If you will, death becomes almost meaningless in this reality. Reality begins to collapse. The island isn't just infected. It's pretty much been rewritten in the cosmic blanket of this Aether saga. Now, is Richtofen truly the villain? Is Richtofen the bad guy? The answer isn't very simple, because villains typically act out of greed, malice, selfish ambitions. Richtofen acts kind of out of obsession. He genuinely believes he's saving people. He genuinely believes his actions are justified, and that's kind of what makes him dangerous. The most frightening villains aren't the ones who know they're evil. They're the ones who think they're right. Now, Totenreich reinforces this idea repeatedly. The deeper we explore the island's secrets, we could even talk about the bomb in New York City. The more we encounter evidence of people making terrible decisions for understandable reasons, the more it seems to be like we could side with Richtofen. Now, nobody wants to wake up intending to unleash cosmic horror. Nobody plans on destroying reality. They convince themselves the risks are worth it, and that's exactly how disaster begins. And Richtofen may not just be evil. He could just be ignorant. But he might be the single most dangerous human being alive in this universe, because he keeps convincing himself that one more experiment, one more sacrifice, one more secret will finally solve everything. Now, perhaps the most unsettling possibility is that Richtofen already understands far more than anyone has realized. Totenreich contains multiple hints suggesting that larger events are unfolding behind the scenes, and Richtofen does know about that. Events connected to the Dark Aether, events connected to the ancient entities, events connected to the future conflicts, events connected to the fractured universe, events connected to old universe from the fractured universe into the Aether storyline. The saga continues. Now, if anyone is piecing together these clues, it's Richtofen. The man has spent years studying phenomena that nobody else can explain. Years gathering information, years preparing for possibilities others can't even imagine. The question isn't whether Richtofen has a plan. The question is whether that plan will save humanity or doom it. Now, the future of the Dark Aether saga does technically rest in his hands. So, what is really happening with Edward Richtofen and Totenreich? He's chasing answers. But perhaps more importantly, he's repeating the same pattern that has defined his entire life. Believing that if he could just go a little further, learn a little bit more, and push a little harder, He could finally fix everything. But Totenreich asks a terrifying question. What if some things aren't meant to be fixed? What if the Dark Aether can't even be saved? It can't be controlled. What if every attempt to save reality only brings it closer to its destruction, right? Because if zombies' history has taught us anything, it's this. Never underestimate our Dr. Richtofen. You know what I'm saying? And never assume you figured out his true plan. The cycle, it continues.